It started with what would Laura Rosen do? And now we're asking what would Sharon Raydor do? Welcome to episode 4 of What Would Sharon Raydor Do? Podcast where we speak with the woman that knows her best, Mary McDonnell, about Sharon's backstory, decision making, and thought process. This is Tony Denison. Surprise, surprise, surprise. This episode we'll be diving into is episode 4 of season 5, Skin Deep. So there may be some spoilers ahead. Question. We get to see more of the dynamic of Sharon and Andy. When Andy makes comments about the realtor's assets, what was going through Sharon's mind?
Well, first of all, Tony, welcome. It's so much fun to have you here. We've just been laughing since we started. He's sitting here with headphones on looking like a sports announcer, which I really love. Yeah, when Andy starts doing these things around this realtor woman and her, whatever, I think what goes on in Sharon is, oh, right, Andy's a guy. I mean, on top of how great he is and what a great boyfriend he is and what a great cop he is and what all those things, these moments he's revealing to her that sort of guy-girl thing. It's like, oh, really? Are we going to be distracted by the realtor's butt? You know what I mean? It's like Sharon is asking these questions. And I think that Andy picks up on that and kind of, what do you think?
No, I think so too. I mean, I think that Andy is being very collegial and then all of a sudden goes, oh, wait a minute, that didn't come out right. Okay, let me try this. Oh, that didn't come right. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Oh, okay, now that my mouth's completely filled with my feet, I'll just sit here and smile.
Yeah. And you know what? It's funny because that's part of what I like about them, because you don't necessarily see a couple that at the outset or obviously is perfectly suited.
Mm-hmm.
They're really very different. So when they have these little bumps and get over them quickly, oh, it's very hopeful.
Yeah, it is. It does work. I mean, clearly, like I said, Andy puts his foot in his mouth and then puts the other foot in, and but it's Sharon's reactions or response to it, because she doesn't really react. She sort of responds, and because it's a response and not a reaction, Andy's like sort of let off the hook a little bit, But there is a sort of a playfulness,
yeah,
that I think defines who we are.
Yeah, I agree.
And in an immediate follow-up question to the previous one, we get to see a more funny side of Sharon in this episode. Can you talk about the process of playing the more lighthearted and funny side of Sharon as opposed to the serious, more professional side?
Well, I think what I like about it, Tony, about this episode, is that when Sharon agrees to go look at the house, she surrenders to the event of looking at the house. And that's what happens. It's sort of, she very rarely gives up her professional preoccupation for an event unless it's some conversations we've had together or some things that happened between she and Rusty. She's 100% there. Or when she was completely distracted by Jack. But this is the first time we've seen her do something with Andy where she lets her job go and gets completely absorbed in the event. And the event is delightful. The house is charming. And the whole feeling of, are we really going to do this, suddenly takes over. And I experienced that side of hers that's playful and kind of childlike at the idea. What did you think?
Well, what I thought was interesting to me, funny we're talking about this now, and I didn't get a chance to mention it to you. It's like as we're walking through the house, the way it was shot, we start at the back end of the house and start walking towards the front door. And almost immediately there was this element or this part of Sharon Mary that suddenly it was like, oh, okay, oh, and then this is, okay, I can see where this is going to go, where this is going to go. And I'm like, okay, and I'm just walking along. Oh yeah, sure, whatever you want.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
just as long as you're happy about the possibility of moving into this place, because it's a wonderful home, really, when
Yeah.
you think about it. The house that they picked out. So it's kind of like, yeah, and okay, that'll be
I
there.
know it
And
was already hanging
yeah, you were
ballet
hanging.
paintings
Yeah, you
and
were.
watercolors.
She was like selecting the colors and the furniture and stuff, and Andy was kind of like, okay, well,
I
I guess
think it
there'll be
was,
one room in the house I can have. I mean,
and I remember the look on your face. Like Andy was so surprised that Sharon jumped in so
Yeah,
thoroughly
yeah,
that she
that's
was
right.
already
Exactly.
decorating.
Exactly. It was wonderful.
And
And
poor Rusty was like, "What
oh
are
yeah,
they doing? Oh my God!"
yeah.
It was very fun.
That was a good scene. That was a lot of fun. Well, one thing I can say for sure is that I'm really loving this season, seeing Sharon outside of the office in a different element. So I guess my question then to you, Mary, is can you talk about that other side of Sharon, the funny side that we don't get to see as much in the office? And where does that funny side come from?
Well, I'm not sure if I would call it a funny side. I think that if Sharon gets to be relaxed, if Sharon, and there's a funny word that I'm going to use here. I just realized I was going to say, if Sharon gets to feel safe, and part of her feeling safe, I think, comes when she feels like everything is taken care of and she doesn't have to maintain control, then there's a woman there that really likes to goof around, likes to have fun. And what I found out about her through the relationship with Andy is, remember the episode we did last year? It was it was a ball game, a Dodger game we couldn't go to.
Oh,
I
yes,
remember
that's
we wore
right.
the hats and stuff. And I remember thinking at that time, this is another side of her. I know she loves the ballet. I know she loves the opera. Do you know what I mean? Because we've seen those things through, at least, or heard about them. But I didn't know she loved the Dodgers. But Andy loves the Dodgers, so maybe she's learning to love the Dodgers.
Right, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
We all were supposed to go to this ball game, and
yeah,
we couldn't go. We had great seats, and
yeah.
we couldn't go.
And I always had, in my mind, Sharon grew up in a wealthy family because I couldn't figure out how she would have so many Armani suits on a cop's salary. So I figured that she's a trust fund kid. So even though things went south with Jack financially because of his addictions, I think she's pretty good with money, and she had some in her. So I think she grew up with a certain amount of culture. And so I know that part of her. So then I wonder, well, did Andy like the ballet when she took him to that? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I think about with them, is sort of they get to perhaps make each other laugh by turning each other on to things that they don't know that much about or haven't had that much experience with. What do you think? Do you think?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, there's this very serious side of Sharon because she's she's the person in charge of the office. She's the captain. But along with the seriousness comes this directness. And speaking for Tony, and hopefully I've put that a little into Andy. I'm very attracted to directness. So when your character is being very direct, for me, I find that like as a turn on. It's like that's really interesting, like somebody who speaks their mind, and there's just a slight bit of sassiness to it, but it's very playful. And that I think that's smart and sassy is like you can't go wrong.
That's good. I like
Yeah,
that.
and Tony personally loves smart, sassy, and sexy. So she's got all three.
Well, let me just say one more thing about
Very sexy, actually.
outside of the office, or let's go back to the scene we were talking about at the house. It is almost impossible as an actor to resist Tony Denison's smile. I mean that 100% honestly. I'm not just saying that to make you feel good, Tony, and make you smile more because it's fun to watch. I completely mean it. When you're doing a scene with Tony and he looks at you and just smiles, it comes from his toes. It's 100%. You cannot resist it. If an actor is looking at that in a scene and they don't respond, they should be fired because they're not present. And I think that's had a big effect on Sharon. I think Tony Denison's smile has helped create Sharon Raydor's character. That's what I think. I never thought about it before, but now I know for sure.
But the same could be said for you. There's a real comfort in your smile. There really is. There's a real, like, everything's going to be okay. Really, seriously. And that happens for Sharon and for Mary. It's like when Mary is smiling, it's like everything's going to be okay. And when Sharon is smiling, even more so, everything's going to be okay. Because ultimately in the job that Sharon has, that we all have on the show, but specifically because she's in charge of the office and the ultimate decision maker, it's hard to smile a lot. I mean, it's hard to smile. It's hard to be very jovial, even though cops do have a tendency to have sort of a gallows humor from time to time. It's harder for the person on top to sort of do that with the persons that she's on top of. I mean, like, I can joke with GW's character and Raymond and whatever, but it's harder for Mary's character to, come in and go, hey guys, and like, did you hear the one about the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we shot, that's so interesting. We shot a scene the other day where Sharon was in her office. We can't talk about it because it would be a spoiler. But in a general sense, you all were talking and laughing in the murder room. And she came out, and I honestly felt like that kid in fourth grade that enters the playground too late because they went to the bathroom.
Right.
And they come running out to the playground. Everybody's already engaged in a game. And you come out and you go, I'm smiling too. I don't know what you're talking about. And Sharon trying to, and Mary Sharon went, oh my God, don't even try. You can't even get in here.
Well,
you know what I mean? It's
yeah,
so
I know
funny.
what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. Well, thank you for your compliment.
You're welcome.
Here's a really important question. We've had a lot of fans ask about the letter that Andy wrote to Sharon, and I'm assuming they're talking about the letter that Andy wrote to Sharon from the hospital. So I guess, what do you think the letter said?
I thought about that letter a lot because we never saw Sharon receive it. And so I would think, like, well, if she did receive it, what did it say, and what did it change? And so I would look for kind of clues in the next couple scripts that things had deepened, and they had. And then I'd go, well, maybe he never gave it to her, but it would have deepened anyway because she almost lost him. They just went through a mortality crisis a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And that usually, if there is a potential love there, that usually moves it forward. When you suddenly realize that this person, because first Sharon had responded to him being hurt as a boss. Someone from her squad was hurt, and let's start with that. So you have to get that settled. And then as we did more scenes and time in the hospital room, there were moments where she really got, wow, this person has moved into my heart in a big way. This would be terrible. And that scared her too. So then I thought, no, he never gave the letter. So what do you think? Do you think he did?
Oh, I think that Andy gave her the letter. And, what was written in the letter is that when you're facing your mortality, the possibility of it in that particular moment, that there was a kind of bittersweetness to it, because Andy finally finds someone that he really loves, and the possibility exists that he might not be able to, to experience it fully. And so I think that's what was in the letter, and telling, Sharon how much he loved her, and that, he trying to be positive. I think I spoke to a lot of different cops over the years of doing the show, and optimism is something that they sort of speak about, but it's hard for them to really have in their heart. They tend to be somewhat pessimistic because of what they've seen. And so this is an example for me, or for Andy, of being as optimistic as he can. But, he's just done his last will and testament with Provenza, where, it could be he may not make it. because it's a really, delicate, sensitive operation. So I think that's what was going on for my character.
Well, then, in that case, now that we've discussed this, we the actors, I think I better go read the letter. That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Tony.
Thanks, but that's what I always thought.
That's very cool. And you know what? It makes perfect sense that I, Sharon, would say, he probably never gave it to me. And I felt enough in that moment. That's as much as I can handle. And that you, Andy, would say, no, he wrote it. He expressed the truth and he gave it to her. Because that's part of our dynamic, is that he's moving forward faster than she is. And her fear of this love that's happening so naturally and organically, given the dysfunctional past relationships, is harder for her to trust giving into it. And he's sort of leading it in that emotional sense. So it's we had the perfect character responses to that question in a way.
Yeah. I mean, cops, like I said, they deal with what I have observed. They're constantly in a struggle of optimism and pessimism, and sometimes pessimism seems to be, if it was a foot race, pessimism is a little further ahead. But I'd like to think of optimism as the turtle, in the race, that maybe ultimately it winds up winning the race.
Oh, that's cool. And I think that there's another thing here that Sharon would be trying not to ever be attached to outcome because of her professional position. And so to receive a letter like that and hear that kind of truth, whatever it said, from one of her detectives also would create she'd have to work very, very hard to make room for what that could potentially cost both of them in the long run. And so I like it. I just like that he sent it. I'm going to rethink it.
And another fan question from Ellie on Twitter. She asks, the balance of wife, mother, and professional is so often talked about in the negative. What about the positive?
Well, I guess maybe what you mean, Ellie, is that her name, the fan? Ellie, it's a good question. And I think what you mean by the negative, but you can write back in and tell us if I misinterpret it. But usually people talk about wife, mother, what were the three elements? Wife, mother, professional, right. And people talk about the struggle, if that's what you mean by negative. And so the positive is that the very struggle that can become a negative, that struggle can also create a really clear mind, because you are forced to balance. You are forced to make conscious choices. You are forced to be aware of your own emotional reactions to life, in the tragedy, in love, in whatever. And you can't be messy with any of it. And that, to me, is a really great discipline, spiritual, emotional, psychological discipline. So the dilemma actually can create a much happier life if you do it well.
Okay, this question is from Mira, and she would like to know, what is it like to be part of the team of major crimes as opposed to being almost like sort of a lone agent in IA?
Well, in IA, the thing I always try to clarify, first of all, is that she was also part of an IA team. But, but it was not, it didn't have the kind of passionate camaraderie, because they don't really go out, they're not on the spot, and they're not in the middle of a crime. They come after the crime's over, and they investigate the crime, and they investigate the cop's behavior in the crime, and they go through a lot. But it doesn't have the same kind of war zone, battlefield camaraderie that the Major Crimes Division has. So Sharon has been able to experience for the first time in her career the kind of do or die they'd lay down for each other and take a bullet for each other feeling in her professional life. And I think it's a much bigger emotional experience for her than we've been able to glimpse yet. What do you think? Like seeing her come in, have you seen her change or be changed by the squad?
Well, I've seen Sharon be changed by being in the squad, but I mean, at the end of the day, like I've always said about my character,
Yeah.
is that my character has a tremendous amount of respect for someone who is a team player and does their job, like just goes gung ho into it and watches the back of somebody else. So clearly, you needed to do that when you were in IA, and
Yeah.
you did exemplary work in IA. So much so that a lot of people who aren't in IA, found things to not want to like about you.
Absolutely.
But that's because you did your job so thoroughly.
Yeah.
And you basically, IA people, watch the back of the entire police department.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That's true.
you come to our squad, and you bring all of that to this, this close-knit little element within the hall of the police department. So we're getting concentrated, a concentrated version of Sharon, because now she can focus all of that attention on the
this-
6 of us.
Yeah, that's
or the
really,
5 of us with you making 6.
That's a
And-
good point.
Yeah, and so for Andy, it's like immediately that one scene that we did, we were in the morgue, when instantly the way you just immediately got to the thing, let's solve, and it was like, you forget about all that other stuff that we may have had been in opposition about, and in that moment, Andy just said, "Wow, this is a person who I'll take a bullet
Oh,
for."
I remember that scene.
Yeah, this is a person
Season
I'd take a
1.
bullet for. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Great. Okay, everybody. So this was a really wonderful time that we just had with Tony Denison. We're all happy and excited. And please, please continue to send your questions. They've been fantastic. This thing just keeps growing, and we're all getting so, I don't know what the word is. We're tickled by our exchange with you, and we want to keep it going. And I just wanted to, everybody clap. I know he won't hear you, but let's clap for Tony Denison. Woo!
Well, thank you for
Tony.
having me here, and this is a lot of fun, actually. And there's some like really, really good questions.
Yeah.
Really good questions.
Yeah. Well, we'll do it again.
Okay, I'd love to.
I'm sure they'll want us for an encore, so
I'd
you know
love
what I
to.
mean.
I'd love to.
So again, send us your questions using hashtag WWSRD on Twitter, commenting on Facebook, or leaving a comment on majorcrimestv.net under this podcast. This podcast, which has been brought to you in part by majorcrimestv.net. Thank you.